Howdy, Shasta College. How you doing? It is hot, 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 as you well know here in the North Northern California. We're hit. We're in a wave. We're breaking records. I'm not saying anything you don't know. Anyway, I hope you're staying cool, staying hydrated, best you can. Pardon my cough. Anyway, I'm recording this at 2 in the morning because, well, I can't sleep as usual. Anyway, how's everything going this week? This week we're talking about music. I started last week, maybe seeing the documentaries on the blues, on classical music, and then I posted a couple documentaries on Beethoven and Mozart. That's what your paper is going to be about. And write a nice, in-depth critical analysis. Make sure it's at least 3 pages, and make sure it has a works cited page. And the works cited page could simply be the readings of the book, which is around chapter 24 and 25. You'll read about both those composers, or quote some other outside source. Hopefully, you do some research, and then also the documentaries. I need to know where you're getting information from. You should have a title page too. A lot of you don't. Please have a title page with your name on it, the class name, my name, and the date, and the name of the paper. Thank you. Simple as that. I think I've caught up on the papers. I'll start grading the Dutch papers this week. I'm going up to Portland for a week to hang out at a friend's house and play some music. But of course, I'll have my computer will be online and connecting. So you know how to get a hold of me if you need to. Some of you have and handed in your papers late. And when you do that, you have to email them to my email because the assignment is closed down. And email your assignments as attachments to rexhaas@yahoo.com. Or text me, tell me what's going on at 530-941-9661. I hope everybody's keeping their journals current. Every week should have an entry what we did that week, what you read, what you researched, what we watched, what I talked about here, just a whole bit. And then have a little bit of reflection on it. Just telling me what you did, what we did, making a list is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for you to give us some thought. Did last week's thing on Dutch painters have an effect on you? Do you like painters? Do you like the language of paint, the artist? Something. Give me a hint that you're connected to the topic, just like this week, the music topic. And I know you like music. Music's so popular. And who's your, the discussion? Who's your go-to on music? Now, I'm sticking to classical for the paper because this 6-week course, usually I do two or 3 weeks on a topic, but I can only do one. I'm trying to do one topic a week here because it's a short session, and so we can't hit all the everything I'd like to hit. I'll talk about it right now, but so in the if you look at your book, chapter 24, 25, it's the age of reason and enlightenment, and lots of things are happening in the world. First of all, America is getting discovered, and we're going to soon have a government free of England. But first, we have to have a revolution, and then also right after our revolution from England, the French have a revolution with Napoleon coming into power, and that changes the whole landscape of the world because essentially he went out into the world and conquered a lot of countries. He's gotten a bad rep over the years as being an evil conqueror, a colonializer. But if you go to France, I hope you do one day, he's essentially a national hero there. He's their George Washington. He freed them from the upper class, the aristocracy. It wasn't pretty, the revolution had a lot of executions, and the reign of terror was pretty bad. To rid themselves of the kings and queens and the spoiled people, so the people more or less took over. It was more of a people's revolution. And our revolution was about being independent, free of taxation and in England rule. And because we're so far away with the ocean, it helped to to go up against England, which was a lot more powerful than we were. But we also had during that time we had some allies and some people helping us, and uh, and we came out okay. I guess we're still here. But during this time also, um, so many things were happening. The industrial age was starting. The modern, I guess you would say, machinery was starting. We have the printing press. We have combines that are starting to be out in the fields. Um, you know, with with our agriculture, things. Power is starting to happen through water, and Benjamin Franklin discovers electricity. Yes, he flew a kite, folks. It's a true story. He was an elder statesman um, who went to Europe for many years. Was our ambassador, you might say, in Europe, and he invented, essentially, came up with electricity, which is a pretty big find. Um, During all this is the music of Mozart and Beethoven. Mozart was a child prodigy. You'll read about it in your research, hopefully in the documentary. Um, he didn't live that long, only into his 30s, but nobody kind of lived long in those days because modern medicine wasn't like it is today. But his music changed the whole landscape of music, coming from what they call a child prodigy. I mean, supposedly he was writing music at 4 years old and doing his first, I think, ballet or opera at six or something crazy. Anyway, um, he was sort of a favorite of the court. In those days, you had to make your living as a musician by having rich patrons pay you to write music and to perform concerts and stuff, and he did. He did okay in his lifetime. Um, Died young, but also later on, Beethoven came, and he was definitely inspired by Mozart, and people think maybe he's the greatest classical composer of all time. He's classically known for very strong music. Beethoven's Fifth, Beethoven's Ninth. It's very bold, strong, melodic, confident music. Um, and he's mostly, I mean, besides his symphonies, he's very famous for going deaf. He went completely deaf, and he was still writing symphonies because he could hear it all up here. He didn't have to hear it on the piano. But it was a horrible twist of fate that he had to lose his hearing. This great musician could no longer hear music. That's tragic, folks. During this time, also, the modern novel was poking its head up. We'd already have Don Quixote, which came out 100 years before this era, um, written by Cervantes, which is some say is maybe the first modern novel in the West. There was other novels happening in the Pacific Rim, but we're mostly sticking to the West right now, so I'm just going to focus on that. Um, and then later on, during this time, writers like Defoe, who wrote Robinson Crusoe, maybe read it in high school, maybe, and these are modern novels that were popular because now we have a printing press, and authors can get published and they can sell their stuff in the marketplace. This is a new deal that changed everything. Um, Women's rights were starting to happen. I mean, they don't get the right to vote for another quite a while, actually, till 1919, somewhere around there. But they're getting more equal rights in the household, in the workplace. They're still essentially confined to being mothers and teachers, shopkeepers. there were artists, there were singers, and there were entertainers. Yes, that happened. They traveled. So there was that happening. Women were starting to get viewed as equal to men. That was a revolution in itself. And then we had an ugly thing that hit everything and everywhere called slavery. The slave trade started in earnest. Now, there had always been slaves. Go back to ancient Greek times. In war, they would capture prisoners and they would make them slaves. You know, the pyramids and most of that was probably made by slave labor. Um, but this was different. This was going to Africa, the continent, and actually kidnapping people out of villages and bringing to different places in the West, not just the U.S., but other places too, but mostly the U.S. And our economy for a long time, especially the cotton industry in the South, depended on slavery. Uh, People had mixed feelings about it. Uh, but some of our greatest men, from Thomas Jefferson to George Washington, owned slaves who worked their farms for free. That was some cheap labor. Washington didn't like the idea of slaves, but he had them. And when Jefferson died, he set his slaves free. But it will lead later, and I could talk about today, to a civil war. The Civil War was over slavery, states' rights, but mostly it's over slavery. We'll talk about that later because we're not there yet. So slavery was very much a part of the culture, was becoming acceptable. And so what does that mean about us as a nation of supposedly free, independent, creative thinking people keeping slaves? It's a dark place in history, but it's the honest place, the truthful place, because it did happen, and nobody's proud of it. We're still paying the price for it to this day. Anyway, music. Besides, I want you guys to look at the classical music this week, but I'm a rock and roll guy who was raised on the Beatles, on the Rolling Stones, Jimi Hendrix, Cream. Then I love the 70s music. Not disco, folks, but that's relevant. Maybe you like disco, the Bee Gees, the whole bit. That's cool. I don't care. But my music in the 70s was punk rock, starting with the Clash and the Sex Pistols and Patti Smith and the Ramones, Talking Heads, television, the whole New York scene coming out of the Andy Warhol scene. New York was a breeding ground for this new sort of music they called punk. Essentially, bands were getting pompous and prog rock, Yes, and Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and a lot of people couldn't play that music. It was too complicated. Punk rock is 3 chords, screamed lyrics about passion, anger, anarchy. It's reduced it down to a level that a lot of people related to. People think punk means a loud, aggressive music. It does not. Talking Heads was considered punk. That's not loud and aggressive. But it's alternative. It's not the mainstream, and it's an attitude also. And then in the 80s, there's a great radio era of the 80s, college radio. We don't have that too much anymore. A lot of college campuses around the country had their own radio stations that could broadcast 50, 60 miles away. And so a lot of bands like The Replacements, Husker Du, REM, Soul Asylum got their careers going on. It was FM radio on college radio. It was an outlet for alternative bands, not on their AM radio that was for popular bands, like Pink Floyd and Bee Gees, etc. And a lot of people couldn't get on those play stations, but you could get on the college radio. It was a great outlet in creative time in America and music. which led up to the grunge scene in Seattle with the Nirvana, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains. Um, yeah, Pearl Jam. And in the culture of inner city culture, the black culture was turning from Motown music of the 60s and 70s to starting with the hip hop, early hip hop in the 80s, which has developed into what they call rap music and hip hop music, and especially popular in the 90s, got very angry. Um, and misogynist and everything else, but some brownie stuff came out of there, like the Wu Tang Clan gang and Tupac, uh, and it became sort of the punk rock for the black culture. Angry people talking about real topics makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but that's the way it was, and it was an outlet. And now we're in the 2000s. It's kind of not so angry. We've got Taylor Swift and Justin Bieber and people that are kind of pop and they're kind of blah to me, mainstream, popular as hell. I realize that. Beyonce to, you know, the ones that are popular now better than I do. But I want you guys to just concentrate it this week on Mozart, Beethoven, why they mattered. And please don't just do a copy and paste job from a Wikipedia site. It doesn't. I want to know why their music mattered, not where they were born or educated. That's all cool. The bio stuff is all right, but why does their music matter then, and why does it still matter now? That's what I'm looking for in this whole class. Why does any of these artists still matter after all these years? Why does Shakespeare matter 500 years after his death? Um, because he's told our stories. These musicians are telling our stories. Pardon me. And that's what this whole class is about, is what is going on in the world, what's going on right now. We've got fierce political upheavals right now in this country. We've got wars in the Ukraine. We've got wars in Israel. There's a lot of stuff going on right now. In the meantime, we're putting out happy movies in Hollywood and musicals on Broadway, and people are still trying to find their place in the world and have some meaning in their life. It's not easy when there are bombs being dropped on innocent people. So that's what you look at. Look at the musician, look at the creative artist, and look at the culture they lived in, the times they lived in. And so we're still coming out of the Renaissance into modern times. And we got there because more people are educated than ever before. More people can read and write than ever before. And people are traveling all over the world. It's long before internet. And the only way you could get information is to spread it word of mouth. And that's what's happening. Right now, this is a fertile time in our history. And this class is sort of history class through the arts. And right now, we're in from about 1650 to the 1800s. And that's getting pretty close to where we are now. It's getting close. Anyway, you know what to do with the paper. Please stay focused on it. If you're going to be late, you will lose points. I know people mess up schedules, their computers messed up, but you will still lose points because I give you plenty of time to do the paper, an entire week. Anyway, I hope you guys are watching something interesting. I've been watching some great old movies from the 60s, actually, which I grew up on, and see if they still uphold. I'm watching a great movie right now called 5 Easy Pieces with Jack Nicholson. We're going to do a week on film coming up. Jack Nicholson, who's 90 now or something, in his heyday. This movie came out 70, I think, and it put him on the map big time uh, as an important artist, important actor. A generational revolution was starting in film in the 1970s with films like this and Easy Rider and The Godfather and so many more. We'll talk about film in a couple weeks. Anyway, keep safe out there, keep hydrated, um, try to stay cool, and I'll see you next week when the story of the humanities and the arts will continue.